Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Rocket Mortgage Initial Research Show. First off, I am broadcasting through a thunderstorm, so if you see any flashes of light, hear any thunder, or heaven forbid, the stream cuts out, you will know why. And then we have two shout outs for the community this week. First off, in non-golf material, Pop's Call won an MLB showdown earlier this week. So congratulations to you. Took down first place in that showdown contest. And then the other shout out for the members of the community goes to my friend Dave, who hit the top 10 on Denny McCarthy. So congratulations to you both on your successful week and weekends. For me, it was an unmitigated disaster. DFS, nothing went right. I had 6 of 6 lineups that made it through to the weekend. Was very high on CT Pan. He shoots about a 94 on Thursday, takes himself right out of the tournament. Max Homa, I was very high on. Misses the cut on the number that demolished any 6 of 6s in the big $25 contest that I generally enter. So not a lot went well. Didn't have enough Keegan, didn't have enough Rory, Xander, all of that. So it was a very, very poor weekend in terms of DFS. The outrights had a chance. Denny McCarthy shoots even par on Saturday. And while he wasn't out of the tournament, the outright looked very slim from there, especially the way Keegan was playing. I also chose Mark Hubbard over Ches Reavie. Just nothing went right this weekend. And on top of all of that, in the baseball league, we just got crushed. So it was just a poor weekend all the way around. So we're going to try and turn our fortunes around for the Rocket Mortgage. We had been building some momentum leading from the Memorial up to last weekend. And then the Travelers kind of dissipated all that. So we're going to try to get back on the right foot for the Rocket Mortgage. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check them out. It's simply well worth your investment. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my Twitter and Instagram. This is where I post research on Monday afternoons regarding the PGA Tour. So if you would like to see the findings of my research, then give me a follow at your preferred social media sites, Twitter or Instagram. I post that and the findings that I see every Monday afternoon. Sometimes it's Monday evening, but it's generally out there on Mondays. Twitter is also where I place my betting cards for the PGA Tour every week. That'll be no different this week. That'll come out every Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see my betting cards every week, give me a follow over at Twitter. Lastly, Twitter is where I place my quick-hitting baseball content. 3 players that I think will accrue their value, 3 players that I don't. So if you want to see some quick-hitting baseball content, give me a follow over at Twitter. Lastly, for social media, Gabe and his Twitter is in the description. He writes a very, very good article called The Fringe. We've been working closely together for the past couple of months. I don't think it's any coincidence that I've started to build some momentum working closely with him. I know he's had some up and down weeks, but when you get two analytic minds working together, good things usually come about, or at least a pretty good process starts to formulate and a analytic view into the week of golf. So I highly suggest you go give Gabe a follow over at Twitter and subscribe to his article. It's a very, very good read and a good way to start your week. And then lastly, for this intro, we are live. Chat is open. Again, I want to hear from you all. If you were successful for the Travelers Championship, please jump into chat. Let me know. I would love to be able to shout out more members of the community who have success each week. What are you looking forward to for the Rocket Mortgage? How much do you know of Detroit Golf Club? This has not been a very long-standing tournament on the PGA Tour, only going back to 2019. So how much do you know of Detroit Golf Club? There's a few high name or big name players here this week, but not a designated event. So we're going to be looking for some values wherever we can find them. So jump into chat. Would love the interaction and the discussion. So let's do our initial research for the 2023 Rocket Mortgage. And we're going to start, as we always do on a Sunday evening, over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. And before I forget, I have seen one field change so far this week, in the sense that Andrew Putnam has withdrawn. He is not going to play at the Rocket Mortgage this week. And then the sponsor exemptions were listed. The most notable of those was Nikolai Højgaard. So Højgaard getting another start on the PGA Tour before the Open Championship next month. But we are here at Detroit Golf Club. Let's see if I can zoom in for you all here. Help it a little bit. That's about the best I'm going to be able to get it. But we're at Detroit Golf Club, obviously in Detroit, Michigan. You see, Detroit Golf Club is a par 72, listed at 7,370 yards. And it says unofficial here. That is what the scorecard has as well for this week. So just under 7,400 yards, that boundary for long courses. So nothing to do with long courses this week. And in fact, with this being a par 72, this is actually one of the shorter par 72s on the PGA Tour. But we're not going to do anything with short courses either, as you see the actual yardage there. What we can do, especially from a filter standpoint when we move to Fantasy National, this is a Don Ross design, one of a few that is on the PGA Tour. Probably most known for Eastlake, that would be my guess, the Tour Championship. But Don Ross was also the architect or designer of Sedgefield, the Wyndham Championship, a couple others throughout the PGA Tour. So he's got a few designs. We'll definitely be able to use that filter. This is a Don Ross design. It has been renovated. Robert Trent Jones, Arthur Hills, most recently by Bruce Hepner, but this is a Don Ross design. So typical Don Ross features, especially in terms of slopey greens, undulating, generally pitched from back to front. Narrow, not necessarily narrow, but tree lined. So pretty usual suspects in terms of Don Ross design features here at Detroit Golf Club. The average green size, pretty small here, 5,150 square feet, whereas the average on the PGA Tour, I've seen anywhere between 5,500 and 6,000 square feet. So either way, greens this week are small, another feature of Don Ross designs. Fairway is pretty wide. We have 30 acres in total. Most PGA Tour events have anywhere from about 25 to 27. So lots of fairway. Not a whole lot of rough, but it does get deep. 4-inch deep rough. Not unlike what we saw at the Travelers. The difference is there's no fescue here. This is all bluegrass rough. But pretty wide, pretty generous fairways. Only one hole with water in play. So big scores really don't come into the picture. And we'll see that when we move to Fantasy National and the course breakdown there. There's another filter we're going to be using quite heavily throughout this week. And that's going to be the easy to par filter. But greens and grass throughout the course. We are on Bent and Poa annua again, just like we were for the Travelers. We were there for the Canadian Open at Oakdale. So we've been looking at a few Bent and Poa annua surface types the past couple 2-3 weeks or so. So no change there. We're going to be looking at the same courses that we were last week for the Travelers, especially in terms of putting. Collars are the same. The fairways are bent in Poa annua as well, and then as mentioned, the rough is a bluegrass mix measuring to 4 inches thick. So there's a look at Detroit Golf Club from a GCSAA tournament fact sheet standpoint. The key takeaways here: a Don Ross design. There are a few Don Ross designs on the PGA Tour, most notably Sedgefield and Eastlake. So that's a good idea of where to start in your research there. Par 72 met just under 7,400 yards, but we're not going to do anything with long courses as this plays pretty short. Greens are pretty small, as you would expect from a Don Ross design, and we are on bent and Poa annua greens again, just like we were for the Travelers. One other note before I forget: the Detroit Golf Club is actually a 36-hole property, and while this is technically a composite, meaning they use a few holes from both courses, you see here this note: tournament holes 1 and 2 are the members' 8th and 9th holes, I believe, on the north course, and then the tournament's number 3 is played from the north number 1 tee box to the south number 1 green, and that is the only hole that is used on the south course. So 17 of the 18 holes are on the north course. You do use the number 1 tee on the north course to go to the south number 1 green. So that is the only portion of the south course that's used, but it is technically a composite course, not the entirety of the north course. Wanted to make sure I gave you that note before moving on. So there's a look at Detroit Golf Club. Let's move to Fantasy National. And as I mentioned in the intro, a few bigger names here, but with this not being a designated event, a lot of the big names have decided to take the week off. Your defending champion is Tony Finau. Some other big names here this week: Ricky Fowler, Max Homa, Colin Morikawa, Sungjae, Hideki. A little bit further down, you see I've got this sorted on strokes gained total just this calendar year. A couple other bigger names here: Tom Kim, of course the winner at the Travelers, Keegan Bradley. Justin Thomas is here, and then Nikolai Højgaard. Bigger name in terms of OWGR, maybe not so much on the PGA Tour yet. But there's the list of the big names that are here this week in Detroit, and you see the strokes gained total for 2023 there. Before we get too far into this, let's go ahead and jump to the course breakdown at Fantasy National. First thing I like to do whenever I look at a scorecard for a golf course, I try to find where par is. So I look at the 9th and 10th most difficult holes. If par falls to there, then you know that the course plays to right at average in terms of difficulty. Well, you see the 9th and 10th are both 7/100ths of a shot under par. We move to the 8th, still under par. So in between the 7th and 8th most difficult holes here at Detroit Golf Club is where par falls. So that would naturally lean to easier in terms of difficulty anyway, and this is going to get even more skewed in that direction. As you see, the easiest hole, the par 5 17th, plays to a half a shot under par. You have a quarter of a shot, 4/10, a third of a shot, just big numbers in terms of under par scoring on these par 5s. You have some short par 3s that are really gettable. You see the 2/10, 15/100ths, and again, apologies if you hear the rain again, broadcasting through the middle of a thunderstorm, so I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly. Might be a shorter show, so that way I make sure I get everything in. But at the other end of the spectrum, there really isn't a whole lot of difficult holes here at Detroit Golf Club. The hardest, the par 3 11th, is very long. It is difficult. Par 3 measuring 233 on the scorecard. Does play the 13/100ths over par, but you see nothing that's approaching a half, a third, or 4/10, and you very quickly get into the single digits in terms of hundredths. The third most difficult, 800ths. You have 500ths, 1/10. So a lot more scoring under par than there is over par here at Detroit Golf Club. So again, highlighting the ease, at least for the pros, generally speaking, for Detroit Golf Club. We move to strokes gained by shot type per round, and not unlike the Travelers, the main factor, at least for your top tens, has been putting, and that is generally pretty common across Bent and Poa annua courses that I have seen. It was that way for the Travelers. Of course, Oakdale was brand new, never seen before in terms of on the PGA Tour. The other is Silverado. That one's escaping me at the moment. We'll check that just very, very quickly. Where the host of the Fortinet used to be the Safeway is held. Yeah, in fact, Silverado main shot type is putting as well. So that is a commonality between all three of the regular stops on the PGA Tour that have Bent and Poa annua listed as their surface type, is that strokes gained putting is the most important shot type per round. You see almost one full shot per round for your players that are finishing in the top 10. And it is a short game, or it's listed as a short game course in the sense that around the green is very, very close to off the tee. So when that's the case and putting is outweighing the approach, you're going to get what looks to be a short game course. I think that's a little bit misleading, but we'll go into that tonight and throughout the week. Moving into the top fives, you see the putting just starts to really, really dominate in terms of the importance around the green and off the tee. Fairly similar. Off the tee still slightly, and I mean by the narrowest of margins, more important than around the green, but the putting really taking off from the approach. And you see for the winners, over 1.5 per round in terms of putting, whereas the approach still hasn't hit 1 per round. So it's all in the putting. So again, just similar to the Travelers, which we saw last week, the Fortinet, much the same, at least for the top tens. Another week where we're going to emphasize putting. I'm going to reset this to the top tens. We're going to look at average strokes gained by hole by par as well. With 4 par 5s, you would expect the par 5s to really, really carry a lot of weight this week, especially since par 5s are generally where professionals make a lot of their scoring. We saw last week that even with only 2 par 5s, the heaviest or most strokes gained was in the par 5s. And the par 3s really lagged behind, which was surprising for me for TBC River Highlands, but that's what the graph showed. You've got a lot of the same here, except the par 4s are very, very close to the par 5s for your top 10s. Moving into the top 5s, much the same. Now the par 3s do start to catch up a little bit here in terms of strokes gained by hole by par. And then for your winners, par 3s don't matter, at least for your winners. It's all in the par 5s and some specific par 4s, which we'll get into. I don't think it's going to be correct to ignore the par 3s, but you see the winners haven't needed to perform well on those to obviously to win. So we're going to reset that. We're going to be looking at 5s and 4s mostly throughout the week. Hole composition. 4 par 3s. You have 2 pretty short par 3s measuring from 150 to 175, a long par 3, and the aforementioned most difficult hole on the course, 233-yard par 3. So there's the 4 par 3s split into their respective buckets. The par 4s pretty evenly split here. You've got 4 short par 4s from 350 to 4, and you've got 4 long par 4s that measure 450 to 5. and then the other 2 are from 400 450. So we don't have any drivable par 4s this week, and we don't have anything over 500 plus, but your 10 par 4s comfortably measure between 350 and 5, and we'll see throughout this week which one of these two, if either, of the par 4 links matter. If I recall correctly, I think it's the 350 to 4, but I don't want to say that definitively until we get really heavy into the data, which will be tomorrow night. And then lastly, for the par 5s, this is where the length of the course really does come in. You have 3 par 5s that measure from 550 to 600, and then one that is a true 3-shot par 5 that measures 600 to 650. That is the par 5 4th, measuring at 635. And you see it only yields an eagle about 0.7% of the time. So not even 1% eagle rate. Now, where your eagles come are in the back 9 par 5s, yielding an eagle at 2.5% and 2%. But this is a true, legitimate 3-shot par 5. The other 3 are attackable. Approach shot distribution, majority of approach shots here only due to the fact that most pros are going to be going for these par 5s and 2. You do have a few longer par 4s, so the majority of approach shots do come from 200 plus, but lower in terms of against the tour average. So against the tour average, majority of your approach shots come in this 100 to 125 range, maybe even 75 to 100. So lots of wedges, at least against the PGA Tour average, and we'll see if that is a big factor in who plays well at Detroit Golf Club throughout the week. The Rocket Mortgage has only been going for 4 years, so cut line has been anywhere, or it's been only 2 places. The first 2 years played at -4. That is extremely easy. Extremely easy. The past 2 years it's played to -2. I will say 2021 was a tad bit different in the sense that the wind really picked up that week for the Rocket Mortgage. That is what led to scores being a little bit lower or depressed. But generally your winners are in the 23 to 25 range. Again, big emphasis on ease this week. And you can see that in the scoring distribution here. More than 22% birdies at Detroit Golf Club versus 12% bogeys. The Eagles bar, not very, very high, but neither is the doubles bar. So, as you can see, just clearly many, many, many more scores under par than over par at Detroit Golf Club. Driving accuracy, mentioned this a little bit in the GCSA tournament fact sheet. These fairways are pretty generous. They're fairly wide, so you hit your accuracy here off the tee about 65% of the time. And a lot of times you would think that players would be clubbing down if the accuracy is that high. Not the case. This is just it's just easy. So players are going to have drivers in their hand, and the fairways are pretty generous. So we'll see what kind of effect that has on players who we might want to focus on. Accuracy higher here, distance higher here than the tour average. Green and regulation percentages much higher here, even though these greens are smaller. Again, leading to just pointing to the ease of the tournament. Scrambling, nothing we want to focus on either. Scrambling is much easier here, or professionals are much more successful scrambling here than the average tour event. And then proximity, this is just relating to the size of the greens. With small greens, if you're hitting the green, you should be closer to the hole, and that's the case here by about a full foot. In fact, exactly 1 full foot closer on proximity on greens and regulation here versus the average tour event. So there's a look at Detroit Golf Club from a scorecard and graphical view. We're going to go and check the historic conditions very, very quickly, and then start looking at some specific players this week at the Rocket Mortgage. You see in the 4 years that the Rocket Mortgage has happened, only 2 rounds have even been average. All the others have been easy. In fact, every single round the first 2 years was easy. You had 1 round in 2021, and that was when the wins really picked up. And you had 1 round that was average last year. Again, the wins had picked up. So very, very easy course. The greens, we've talked that they are bent and Poa annua. Thanks to Gabe, who has been very, very helpful in telling me what courses have bent and Poa annua, bent and Poa trivialis, and all that. So big thanks to Gabe for that. So we'll be able to know exactly what surface we want to look at and what courses we want to compare that to. Hitting fairways sometimes, I guess, has been difficult. I would imagine that players just don't care. With the driver in hand, they're just trying to hit it as far as they can. Even though the rough is long, it does not appear to be difficult to play out of. And these greens have always been listed as fast. So with that, we're going to go back to the player page here at Fantasy National. One of the first things we can look at, this is a Don Ross design. So some other Don Ross designs that you will want to take a look at, and again, don't worry, Fantasy National hasn't aired out. I just have this for 2023. Eastlake, the Tour Championship, and Sedgefield. Plainfield, I believe, was a playoff event in the mid-teens. I'm not sure exactly which one. But with the few rounds that we have, I'm going to go all the way back to 2019. And this is just the start of the Rocket Mortgage. It debuted in 2019. So since the beginning of 2019, your top performers on Don Ross designs have been Tom Kim, Chris Kirk, Taylor Moore, Cam Davis, Taylor Pendrith, Sung Jae, Troy Merritt, Brian Stewart, Ben On, and Tony Finau. Of course, Tony Finau, your defending champion. Cam Davis won the Rocket Mortgage in 2021. Tom Kim and his win at Sedgefield, another Don Ross design. So makes a lot of sense there to see these players up here in the top 10 for Don Ross designs. Troy Merritt was in the playoff with Cameron Davis when Cam Davis won. Chris Kirk has played, I imagine, this event very, very well. He has played the Wyndham well in his 1 year. So there's a look at the players who have played Don Ross designs, a good way to start your week. Perhaps give these players a little bit of extra consideration in wagering or early interest in terms of DFS. Something else that we know about Detroit Golf Club, it is very, very easy. So I'm going to add the easy filter. And I'm going to bring this in because we have so many rounds. I do want to narrow the timeline in a little bit so that way the data is not as noisy, to use technical jargon. But your top performers in easy rounds since the beginning of 2022, so the past 18 months, your top performers when a round has been easy: Tony Finau, Tom Kim, Tom Hoagie, Hideki, JJ Spawn, Thomas Detry, Alex Smalley, Justin Thomas, Taylor Moore, Patrick Rogers, Tyler Duncan, and Max Homa. Again, skipping Andrew Putnam, he is withdrawn. A lot of overlap here between the Don Ross top 10 and the easy to par top 12 or 13 or so just for ties. But Tony Finau, Tom Kim up there in both top 10s. Justin Thomas, I believe, was just outside the top 10 for Don Ross. I know Taylor Moore was in the top 10 for Don Ross. So a lot of overlap here on these players between Easy to Par and Dawn Ross. All right, we're going to remove those filters. Last thing I'm going to look at in terms of an overview or in the strokes gained page view. Again, apologies for having to skip around on the filter or the timeline, but I'm going to go all the way back to 2019 because I'm going to look at some putting, and we're going to look at some specific courses. First off, we do want to look at Detroit Golf Club, where we are this week for Bent and Poa annua. We want to look at Oakdale, which we just saw for the Canadian Open this year. Even though it's not a regular course on the PGA Tour, it happened so recently that we definitely want to see who putt well at that tournament, since the majority of players, I can't say the majority, but a lot of the players that played at Oakdale are here this week. We want Silverado, the host of the Fortinet, there it is, has Bent and Poa annua. And lastly, we want TPC River Highlands, where we were last week for the Travelers, which also has Bent and Poa annua. So on those four courses, the four that have Bent and Poa annua regularly on the PGA Tour, or the three that have Bent and Poa annua regularly, plus Oakdale, which we just saw. Your top putters on Bent and Poa annua surfaces going back to 2019: Harris English, Bryce Garnett, Zach Blair, Justin Lauer, Mark Hubbard, Bo Hostler, Adam Long, Brian Stewart, Adam Hadwin, and Troy Merritt are your top 10 putters on that surface. Now, I don't think the Travelers is in here. No, so this ordering might get changed up a little bit when the Travelers gets loaded. I imagine very late tonight or tomorrow. But of course, Harris English played fairly well at the Travelers. He made the cut and then kind of stalled on the weekend. Zach Blair, a terrific Travelers, probably a lot based on that putter. Mark Hubbard, who missed the cut. So this ordering will definitely change a little bit, but at least to start your week of research, highlight these top 10 as they have been very, very good on Bent and Poa annua greens the past 4 or so years on the PGA Tour. All right, with that, we are going to move quickly to the Tournament History tab, or the Strokes Gained Total tab, however you want to phrase it. But in the 4 years that the Rocket Mortgage has happened, it's always been at Detroit Golf Club, so we don't have to parse out any of this info. Your Strokes Gained Total leader has been JJ Spawn. 4 for 4, nothing outside of a T32. He's got a top 10, he has a top 15, so he's played very, very well. Troy Merritt, also very good here. He missed the cut in the first edition in 2019, then goes T8, loses in the playoff with Cam Davis and Joaquin Neiman, and then tied 14th or top 15 last year. So Troy Merritt has played this event very well, and we also saw that he putts Bent and Poa annua well, and I believe he was up there on Easy. I know he was up there on one of the two. I think it was Easy. Top 10 when rounds are easy. Tony Finau, your defending champion. Chris Kurt, 3 for 3. Nate Lashley, your winner, the inaugural event in 2019. He's missed the cut twice, and then T57 last year, so not fantastic. Cam Davis, of course, misses the cut the first 2 years, then wins, and then has a T14. Some other names here. Sung Jae's played well. He's always played Dawn Ross designs well. Matt Wallace, only 2 for 2, but 2 top 15s. Scott Stallings is 4 for 4. Taylor Pendrith only 1 year, but he gained 13 and a half strokes last year in his T2. Doc Redman, Hideki, Taylor Moore, solo 6th last year. So there's a few of the players who have played Detroit Golf Club well. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played the Rocket Mortgage and Detroit Golf Club well for whatever reason. Harry Higgs, 1 for 3. Kramer Hickok, 1 for 4. James Hahn, 0 for 3. Satoshi Kodaira, 0 for 3. CT Pan, somebody who I was really high on at the Travelers, 0 for 2. Joseph Bramlett, 0 for 3. Chesson Hadley, 1 for 4. Will Gordon, 0 for 2. Adam Long, 0 for 2. Doug Gim, 1 for 3. So there's a list of the names who have not played Detroit Golf Club. I almost said TBC River Highlands. Detroit Golf Club very well for whatever reason. So with that, that's a pretty good segue. I'll bring this back to the player page view. But we're going to move to Microsoft Excel and take a look at a couple of different things about Detroit Golf Club here. This is my comparison course chart. I compare every continuous event or common event on the PGA Tour, full field event, places like Sedgefield, like Detroit, Travelers, TBC River Highlands, places that are continuous stops on the PGA Tour year after year. I always like to compare those courses against each other to see what plays well against other courses. So you can see at Detroit, at least in the 4 years that it's been running, off the tee really hadn't mattered. We kind of saw that in the graphs at Fantasy National, that around the green and off the tee, they were pretty similar to each other in terms of top 10s, 5s, and winners. You see the approach slightly higher than the full field course average on the PGA Tour. And I want to make sure I designate full field course. As for example, I don't include the Masters. It's a limited field, 90 players. I don't include the Tournament of Champions, roughly about 40. And I don't include courses that rotate, say the Canadian Open, the US Open, the Open. What's the other one that rotates? I lost it. PGA. Places that rotate, I don't include as well. I just want to look at continuous courses on the PGA Tour. So, again, another week where putting is the emphasis. 10% more important here than at the average full field course. Very similar as what it was at the Travelers, 10.1%. Now, the difference with the Travelers is that off the tee and even a little around the green a little bit mattered a bit more. This week, it's really all about the putting, perhaps a little bit in approach, but a lot of emphasis again this week in the putting. Moving into the driving statistics, a little bit interesting. These fairways are pretty easy to hit, so that doesn't surprise me to see that fairways gained is a suppressed value, or at least showing that it's not as important. Now, this driving distance number really is really high. And you think about the 4 winners who have won here. Last year, Tony Finau, pretty prodigious in length. Cam Davis, long. 2020 was Bryson, of course, big hitter. But that doesn't mean that you have to be long to compete here. Look at the 2019, the inaugural winner, Nate Lashley, not long off the tee. Troy Merritt has had a lot of success here. He is not long off the tee. So you do want to factor in some distance, but it is not mandatory. It is not as mandatory as what this percentage is saying it is. But I am certainly going to give some advantage to players that are long off the tee, because almost everybody's going to have driver in their hand. The fairways are generally easy to hit, so I want to see the guys who are closer to the hole after they hit their tee shot. Otherwise, even the greens are slightly mitigated in terms of importance. Even though these greens are small, these greens are easy to hit. It's a very easy course, so there's not a lot to be gained by looking at the players who are especially adept at greens and regulation. So at least for our initial look at Detroit Golf Club, we're going to be looking at distance, and we'll really confirm this tomorrow in the data dive. Moving into scoring, all about going low. You can afford a bogey or two, but you see birdies gained a huge number here, 24%, more important than the average full field course. And eagles, even though this is such a minuscule number, I mean, double in less in terms of importance, if that makes sense. I mean, it's a very small number here, but we're going to be looking at birdies or better because eagles do happen. The two back nine par fives do yield an eagle at 2 and 2.5%. That's not a great rate, but it's not nothing. So we're definitely going to be looking at birdies or better, but in your first look this week, really be emphasizing the birdies gained aspect, as that is going to be one of the biggest things, along with putting this week, that we're going to be looking at throughout the entire week. Moving into the pars 3s, 4s, and 5s, we saw this, especially for the winners. The pars 3s really kind of don't matter, especially for the winners on the top 10s and the top 5s. They had a little bit of an amount here, but at least compared to other full field courses, slightly under average. So not going to do a whole lot with par 3s. If there is a range, might be the 200 to 225, but again, there's only one that measures to that length on the scorecard. You have the 233 yard par 3 that could probably fall into this range, but if anything, it just looks like par 3s is where we're going to look at for anything par 3 related. Par 4s, oh shoot, I'm sorry, I lost the row. Par 4s, again, fairly mitigated, which is not surprising considering there's only 10 of them at Detroit Golf Club. But as I recalled when we were going through the course breakdown and the whole composition chart, a heavy emphasis here in the 350 to 4 par 4s, 57% more important than the average full field course versus 1.5, so it's about average for the long par 4s. And again, there's only 2 that measure 400, 450, so they are quite mitigated. So at least early on in your research this week, be paying attention to the 350 to 400 yard par 4s. And then lastly, for the par 5s, this is where quite a bit is going to be focused on, at least in terms of par 3s, 4s, and 5s. You see par 5s, 12% more important. Makes a lot of sense. There are 4 par 5s. That's where pros generally make a lot of their scoring. And we saw that 3 of the 4 par 5s measured 550 to 6. You see that this range is 47% more important than the average full field course. So lots of emphasis here as well. Lastly, we'll take a look at proximity. It is not my best statistic as an analyst, but you see the wedges are where the importance seems to come in. And I say seems because I am just being transparent. I'm not very good with proximity in terms of as an analyst. So there's a look at Rocket Mortgage and Detroit Golf Club compared to other full field courses that are continuous on the PGA Tour. We're going to end the show this evening, as we always do on Sunday evening, with what I call the early look file. This is a player's performance at Detroit Golf Club, or whatever course you're at for the week. So this week, Detroit Golf Club. Performance at that course spread out across usually the past 5 years, but with the Rocket Mortgage only being 4 years in running, we're only going back 4 years. So you can see Matt Wallace had a T10 and a T13, so it's getting rounded. So he's played twice, average finish of 11th. He hasn't missed a cut. Your strokes gained total leader, JJ Spawn. He's played 4 times. He's averaged a 21st place finish at the Rocket Mortgage. Lonto Griffin, 2 and 23. And for these players that have played multiple years, so for example, JJ Spawn actually averages 0.3 under field average off the tee. He's averaging gaining 2.5 in approach. He's averaging gaining 4 on the greens, so on and so forth. So this is performance specifically at Detroit Golf Club. I am going to remove any player that has only played it once. I would like to see players who have played it continuously, or at least semi-continuously, and what they've been good at. And let's go to Wesley Bryan, I suppose. Players who have averaged a top 40. This is 13 players. Again, players who have played it, semi-regularly and have had very, very good finishes, or at least have played it at an elite level. In fact, Troy Merritt's the only one who has missed a cut in these 13 players, and he's only missed 1 cut. This is an average of a 1.2, so it's actually a little bit higher than what I would have expected. But you see the approach, nobody has been negative. You have Troy Merritt, who is exactly field average. This is a 1.9 around the green. This is a 0.8, and the putting, 1.5. Surprising to see that the approach was outweighing the putting for the players who have played at an elite level here. Having said that, you do have 2 players that are negative. Hideki has not putt on or at Detroit Golf Club well, and Keegan does not putt at Detroit Golf Club well. But Keegan's a much better putter now with him utilizing aim point. So I think I would be willing to forgive this number, considering he has played fairly well at this event, even struggling on the greens. Let's see. Going into the driving, you see, as I was mentioning, driving distance isn't mandatory. Henrik Norlander had usually not long. He has played very well here. J.J. Spawn is not long. Chris Kurt, he can get long, or he can be sometimes, but he has not been long here. Troy Merritt's never going to be long. Wesley Bryan's not long, but Tony Finau's a champion. Where are some of these other champions? Cam Davis, long. Of course, Cam Champ has actually played pretty well here, 3 for 4 in terms of making the cut. He's always going to be long. So I am definitely going to favor the guys with distance, but it's not mandatory this week. As you see, some of these players who have played Detroit Golf Club well, they're not long off the tee. Moving into the scoring, this is going to get weighted down by Henrik Norlander's minus 1.6 here. But the majority of these players are Matt Wallace, favoring birdies gained. Hideki, slight, but still favoring birdies gained. Spawn, heavy favor in birdies gained. Lonto Griffin. Tony Finau, your defending champion, almost double in terms of birdies gained versus bogeys avoided. Sung Jae, tripling it. It's going to be one of, if not the biggest factors this week, looking at birdies or better gained. In fact, this is a 2.3. Bogeys avoided is a 2.0. So even with Henrik Norlander's 1.6 in the negative, birdies gained are still outweighing the bogeys avoided. Quickly, par 3s doesn't look all that important. I mean, you see some heavy green here, but these numbers aren't big. 2.8, 2.7. So for the players who have averaged top 40, this is a 0.8 in par 3s. Par 4s are a 2.5, so 3 times that number. And then par 5s, I know it's off your screen, par 5s are 2.0. That's one of the bigger numbers in terms of par 5s I've seen in quite a while. So we're going to have a lot of emphasis in par 5s, of course. Let's see, par 4s, very quickly, 350 to 4. You got a few negatives up here, which is surprising. This is a 0.6, 0.6, 1.5. So for the players who have played it at an elite level, the 450 and 5s are more important than the 350 to 4s. something to perhaps take a note of. But I still think it's the 350 to 4s that we want to focus on this week. But it's definitely interesting to note, as nobody is negative. Anyone who has averaged a top 40 is not negative in terms of strokes gained, par 4s, 450 to 5, specifically at Detroit Golf Club. Moving to the par 5s, again, it looks like the range that we're going to focus on is the 550 to 6. And you can see, I mean, you got a lot of negative in here, a lot of negative in here, a whole lot of green in there. And then finally, in terms of proximity, doesn't look like total prox is going to be much. You would expect that with an easy course, small greens. I don't see anything that really jumps off the page in terms of a specific length of proximity. So we'll dig into this quite heavily tomorrow in the Data Dive show. Look at some past leaderboards, see if there's a range that might stand out. But I don't really see anything. Maybe this 125 to 150. You have a couple of players negative here, but that looks fairly decent, I suppose, for your players who have played Detroit Golf Club at an elite level. Okay. I'll bring you back to the average or best average finish, bring back everybody who's in the field this week, and that's going to do it for the initial research show this evening. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, watching, listening, supporting the channel, by liking the videos, subscribing, commenting. Again, put it in the comments. How was your Travelers? Hopefully it was a lot better than mine. Would love to be able to shout out more members of the community who have success. What are you looking forward to in terms of the Rocket Mortgage? Who are some of the players that you have your eye on early this week? Who are you thinking about wagering when the odds come out tomorrow? All that good stuff. So for all of the wagers you made this past week at the Travelers, for all of the DFS contests you played this past week for the Travelers, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.